This is the Forgecast, your eye into the who's who and what's what in cybersecurity and the cloud. Each episode, we bring you fresh perspectives, personal stories, insights, and advice from leaders, innovators, and change makers forging a stronger future.
Hello and welcome. My name is Alberto Yépez, and I'm co-founder and managing director at Forgepoint Capital. I'm delighted to have Dr. Ed Amoroso with us today. He is one of the trailblazers in our industry, and we're honored to have him as a member of our advisory council. Ed has played numerous leadership roles in our industry. He was the very first Chief Information Security Officer of AT&T, where he served for many, many years and helped shape the strategy and the global infrastructure for AT&T to be one of the leaders in this space. In addition, Ed now is the co-founder and CEO of TAG Cyber, which is a research institution that helps many organizations and individuals with both cybersecurity and climate change issues. In addition, Ed is a professor in NYU, giving cybersecurity classes, and also he was an advisor actively in working with our National Security Agency and the Department of Homeland Security. But delighted to have him here to hear his story, and I want to welcome you, Ed. Thank you for being here.
Alberto, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so, let's try to get into it right away and let's get close and personal. The first thing that I want to ask, and many people in the audience will be wondering is who's Ed Amoroso? What's your story? Where do you grow up? Tell us a little bit about what got you here at the beginning.
Well, I could probably talk for 4 days about this, but my dad was a computer scientist, very early computer scientist at University of Pennsylvania, working on what now would be referred to as artificial intelligence. He was doing this cellular automata work, and it was quite early kind of machine instructions to little smart machines that would do different things, something like that. So when I studied physics in undergrad, but I guess I felt the pull of computing because I really enjoyed that. My dad afterwards said, "Hey, go to Bell Labs, get your work." I went there, joined the Bell Labs, got into a doctoral support program. But my dad said, "You want to get into computer security. That's going to be big." This was in 1983. And I said, "You think so?" He goes, "I have a feeling that's going to be a big area." And I joined the Bell Labs Unix security group. It was like, people go, "Gee, how lucky." And I think it kind of wasn't lucky. My dad, had the insight. So I got to work with some of the most amazing people in the early Unix days. Died and went to heaven, worked in the lab, worked on my PhD, started teaching, started doing research. It was great. First half of my career was like, you literally died and went to heaven. And then one day, Frank Iana, who was running the AT&T network, he came and said, "We've been talking. We're wondering if some of this security thing you're doing," because I was doing some work with NSA at the time. He said, "Could we do something like that to protect AT&T and our network?" And I remember saying, "What would that be?" Like, it wasn't anything like that. He goes, like protect the network from security threats. And I said, "Gee, that's an interesting idea. Wonder how he did it." So I went nosing around. I found Steve Katz at Citigroup, and he was doing something. He had a card that said Chief Information Security Officer. And I said, "Steve, what is that?" He goes, "That's my title. I'm the CISO." And I took it back to work and said, could I be this? And my boss said, "Put whatever you want on the card." So I had cards printed that said, Ed Amoroso, Chief Information Security Officer, AT&T, like the early 90s, mid-90s or something. So I think that might have been the second person. Maybe there were 10 others, but Steve Katz was the first, and he showed me, and I just copied him, and that became my work. Literally from then until now, the last 30 years, that's been my research, that's been my obsession, that's been everything I do is centered on trying to make the Chief Information Security Officer more productive, provide good resources and assistance, And it's really been my passion for so long. That's how you and I became friends, because you worked with so many of them. But yeah, that's my story. That brings me more or less to where I am now.
Yeah, I was afraid to call you when you were in AT&T. CISO, and he's so busy. Everybody's calling him, but I remember you were so warm and always open to finding more about innovation.
Wow.
And finding ways in which we could all benefit from the interaction. And it wasn't always selling something, but it was trying to understand a problem and see how do we solve that solution. But given that you've gone through so many cycles and phases of the information security industry, all the way from research at Bell Labs and becoming the first CISO of AT&T, and now looking at the role of the CISO, how's your perspective change over time over how the different roles a technologist and a CISO, an educator and advisor has changed?
It's a great question. This used to be a nerd thing. It used to be a tech nerd thing. Let's face it, that's what it was. And the only reason anybody came to me is because I knew how to do network security, not because Alberto, I could barely manage my way out of a paper bag. So it was tech nerds. And they sent me to Columbia Business School and said, you have to go. I didn't know what an income statement was. Honestly, it just wasn't something that was part of my life. So in the early days, the people who did this were nerds. There's still a lot of that. And I think you and I both agree that the position has become more business focused. Like we would say that when you're doing it right, you understand the business you're protecting. You have a sense of risk. You have a sense of balance in terms of what you're spending, what you're not spending. You know how to manage people. Yeah, and so on and so forth. These are management issues. So that's the biggest change. It was always this completely nerdy thing to now it's more of an executive role. There's still a big tech component, no question. It's still complicated stuff to stop cyber threats. But I think that's changed. And I think most of the CISOs, there are a lot of ones that you and I are friends with, they're really good. There's a lot of them that are a wonderful balance of business and compliance and technology and management. I'm so envious of those skills because I never had any of those skills. I just had to kind of figure out how to do it. But that's changed for the better, definitely for the better.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of perspective because we always started with the defender view. I need to protect the business. I need to, build the moats and make sure that my information doesn't get compromised and all that. But cybersecurity over time has become an enabler. And to your point, what are you enabling? Well, what business am I in? And what does the business need? And I need to be able to use my knowledge to enable these capabilities, and everybody's going through digital transformation and everything else. So I think you're right. So that it started with always the most technical person will get promoted, not necessarily the most business oriented. And perhaps that person didn't want to be promoted because they didn't want to deal with all the management issues and all the financial stuff. But it's the enabling capability that it has changed the role of the CISO and will continue to be, right? I think that's a very good point.
I coach a lot of, deputy CISOs and younger folks, say direct reports to CISO. And they'll always say, oh, I aspire to the position. And I usually say, hey, let's sit down, have a cup of coffee. We'll talk for an hour. I'll take them through the day in the life and say, are you sure you want that? Now, some of them do, but others say, oh, I didn't realize there was all that. And you go, yeah, it's not just sitting and, hacking iPhones all day. It's a lot of other things that a technical person might find challenging. I'll say that for me, managing people turned out to be a real revelation. Like that, you take that for granted in a tech lab, like when a bunch of developers are in a lab, it's a meritocracy, as you know, where everyone defers to the smartest people. But managing human beings in a work environment where you have to take advantage of and leverage the unique skills that everyone has and make them all march to a common mission, that is really hard. And it has nothing to do with whether you can write code. In fact, I would almost argue that some of the best people I've seen don't know the first thing about tech. There's some wonderful natural managers. You're an example. You're a person that all of us, you have this magnetic personality. You could probably talk me into anything, Alberto, and that's a skill that some people have. And you and I both could list 20 people who don't have that skill. They put them in the lab, they're the greatest, but they would not be the greatest people to be managing people. We all know folks like that. So it's been interesting to see how our profession has morphed into requiring both types.
Appreciate the kind words, and I'll remember that. Not really.
I never say no to you.
Yeah.
You're an easy person to say yes.
Thank you. But so I guess following that thread, and now that you're advising so many different CISOs or aspiring CISOs and organizations in their security program, what inspired you to do that? And it touches on the different facet of Ed Amoroso, the entrepreneur, and says, hey, I need to start this. And I remember it was you bootstrap your business, and it was your family, your son. I remember going to the events they used to do in New York, but it was the family business. So what inspired you to do it? And now maybe tell us a little bit more, where is it and where's it going to be? Because it's no longer cybersecurity. You're dealing with climate tech and all that. Tell us more about what you're trying to accomplish at TAG Cyber.
Well,
not TAG Cyber, the broader TAG, because cyber is only
no,
one piece.
absolutely. Well, I mean, just in terms of the idea of being in business and selling and stuff, despite the fact that I didn't know what an income statement was in a large business, I've been a salesperson my whole life. Like, I think you and I have joked that I may be one of the last living Fuller Brush salespersons. I used to go to knock on doors, and then I had a painting business in high school, and my wife and I ran a retail store for many years. And so at AT&T, I ran a number of businesses as I was doing the CISO position. What happened was the CISO position was elevated, but the group was still small. You know, it was, and you're going to laugh at them, give like 1,000 people. You go, oh my God, a gigantic group. But in, say, Bell Labs or AT&T Labs parlance, my peers had much bigger groups. I'd be sitting next to people at 15,000. I have a smaller group. So there were businesses that sometimes were orphaned, and I'd raise my hand and say I wanted to do it, like the intellectual property group, patent. And I grabbed that group. I loved it. I ran it, but that was an income statement. You're selling patents, and it was a business. So I really found that I had this latent sort of passion for building business and selling and convincing people to write a check. You wouldn't expect that because there's nothing in my background that would have ever suggested that. My mom and dad, both academics, absolutely nothing there that would suggest that I'd be the kind of person who tends to business. I mentioned I went to Columbia Business School. I ate that up. I loved it. Like when I went there, I said, wow, this is great. So right around the time I needed to retire from AT&T, and here's what I mean by need to retire. And I think you'll know what I mean. You know that moment when you're sitting around the team and you're doing a staff meeting and you say, so we need to make sure when they go, oh, Ed, yeah, we did that. And you go, oh, and you say, and we also need to make sure, and they go, no, Ed, we did that last week. And you go, oh, okay. And you look and you realize this person's been with me 17 years, 15 years, 12 years. And you realize they're staring at you thinking, when are you leaving? So it was like, they know that I teach. They knew I wanted to consult and sort of give back. So I'd been there 31 years. So I said, all right, time to go. So I sat with my wife and I said, now it's time to have some fun. Because I thought, I've spent a lifetime. Now I'm going to say a couple things that I think everyone knows, but a little tough. Like in telecom, it hasn't been an easy go the last 20 years. I don't care where you are in telecom. That's a tough industry. And you can almost think of it as an industry where you're being beat up a lot. That's just the nature of that industry. It's not that anybody's doing anything right or wrong. It's just been a tough industry. So I said, I want to get into a situation where I'm kind of going after somebody instead of them going after me. Like, I think it'd be fun. So I knew that there were a few businesses that looked like they might be ripe for a little disruption. I've told you a couple of times that I have the utmost respect for Gartner, but they've been around a long time. They make a lot of money. And I thought they would be just the kind of company that would be fun. to try to disrupt a little bit. I doubt that any of them sit up worrying about me very much, but that became my passion. And for the last few years, we've grown considerably. Double the company just about every year, and we add on customers. We've got 20% of the Fortune 500 now as research and advisory customers in cyber. Admittedly, it's a thin slice, but we've now expanded. We have an artificial intelligence research and advisory practice. And where do you think I got the scientists there? Bell Labs, it's all my friends. And then we do work in clean energy and climate. And so we talk to quite a few startups in that area. It's a very exciting area. I just got off the phone with a very interesting company doing solar. So we're expanding out the research and advisory and trying to build something a little different than what the existing, say, analyst groups do. But that's, for me, it's a rebirth because I've been able to focus the company on one thing, and that's to work for purpose, period. And I learned a lot of that from you. You and Don are, I think, the only venture capital team I've ever met that I really do think you guys work not just for the money, but because you guys do have you have a heart in this whole thing. And again, there's nothing wrong with a finance team working for money. That's the point. There's a lot of VCs around where it's pretty black and white. We make the investments, we take the money, that's it. But I've always been inspired by you guys because you're able to combine good business savvy with also working for purpose. And that's what we try to do. Because we joke, our whole analyst team, most of us are retired CISOs. We've one time calculated how much money in salaries we've stepped away from to make next to nothing. It's government does that too. If you go to work at DHS or something, you're making nothing.
Yeah.
And you could go to work at a big bank and make 20 times what you make, but you do it for a reason. We feel a little bit like we do that. There's a lot of little startups that we work with where we charge them almost nothing. And we give them everything we know, and we pour our heart into it, and we moonlight, try to help. There's so many of those. And then we make up for it when we sell research to a gigantic bank. We're happy to charge them a lot of money. But we have a soft spot, as I know you do, for people in that seed to Series A. Just have a soft spot there. They're working so hard. And if you can say a couple things that inspire them, they remember that. I've had people come back and say, you know what, we had a meeting once and I was having a bad week and you told us X, Y, Z. And that got us through a tough period. I appreciate that. And I think, thank you for making my week. That's the greatest thing. And that's what you do kind of at this point in your career. You crave those times when somebody could use some help. You do it, and then it helps them out. And you think, that's why we do this. That's the reason. It's not, if I wanted to make money, I'd go take another CISO job. So this is better.
So you're off to a great start. We've been seeing you from the sidelines and, beyond our expectations in terms of the way you got started. But then, you're hitting on a couple core things that also we believe at Forgepoint, it's all about purpose. Yeah. It's all about mission. And this is it will take a village to actually rally the community to defend against our nation and, our businesses and our respective privacy issues. So we always say, in a way, the mission continues. Sometimes that's only related to military people. Yeah. But you guys is the same thing. We've been CISO, but the mission continues, right? And it's protecting our digital future, which is not about technical, but we're all transforming. Our lives are becoming increasingly digital, and therefore we need to figure out how we can contribute towards those objectives, right?
I'm going to pay you a compliment here. I would say that from time to time we meet companies that maybe you haven't introduced us to, and we'll have a conversation afterwards, and the conversation is often, I'll bet you that company's funded by Don and Alberto, and that's a compliment, because we usually see something in them, the way they handle themselves, the way they are able to describe the reason they do what they do. And it usually links back, I think, to the guidance that you guys offer. And a lot of times we see ones where we know it's not you guys. You know the ones, like a lot of times our joke, and you know what a boy band is when something is like manufactured? Mm-hmm. We see those, we see right through it. where someone decided, wow, we can make money at, whatever, cloud security posture management. So you grab this person from here and these two people from the Israeli military and this marketer and that, and you put it together and you do a website and give them money and boom. And then we say, why are you in business? And it's crickets.
Mm-hmm.
They go, they really know what the answer is. It's to make money and and you think that's not the reason you do this. You're protecting children's hospitals. You're protecting military, you're protecting society. That's the reason you do that. If you happen to make out nicely in terms of the economics, then that's wonderful. That's why we live in America. But I mean, come on, man, the reason we do this is to protect things. That's what the reason needs to be. And we always see that uniformly with the companies that come through your program. They always have their heads on straight. So keep doing what you're doing. The ones that come through your program are good. They're good for our industry. And there's others that I think are very fine VCs, a lot of your friends, that some not so good.
Yeah, all of them wanna meet you. One of the first things they said, "Oh, can I be part of it?" You just call them. We don't need to ask to,
Yeah,
so,
they call me.
Yeah, and they're part of your program, and really appreciate the guidance and the straightforward nature of your advice. So let's talk a little bit about current issues in our industry. The SEC is about to, publish and require new regulations about how the board of directors should behave, and everybody talks about better, more subject matter expertise and more DNA in a place where they're directing, and their goal is to protect an entity and provide the governance and provide protect all shareholders in essence. So, how do you see the modern enterprise when it comes to board of directors' role or the role of the board in helping drive this transformation that we're going through, especially as it relates to not only CISOs, because to your point, CISOs are salesmen that need to sell to the board, right. But if the board doesn't understand, so how do you see, elaborate a little bit about how you think that is going to drive some of our industry, and also what does it mean to the practitioners?
Let me offer a little bit of a subtlety that I share with the SEC and others. And I sat on the board over at M&T Bank. I loved that. I
remember that.
Very wonderful bank, and I enjoyed it. I like being in a Fortune 500 bank. I learned a lot doing that. But here's my observation. See if this makes sense to you. There are a lot of observers may not know the difference between a formal board of directors and a senior leadership team reporting to a CEO. These are two very different entities, and they have different purpose. So a board of directors does governance and is there to evaluate management and to chime in on big decisions, and is, and really there to provide high-level judgment where it's appropriate. What they're not there to do is manage the business. They're not. That's in an enterprise. If you and I were sitting on the board of a little startup, different story. I'm talking about a corporate, Fortune 500 board, which is really what the SEC is aiming their guidance at. So my opinion is there's certainly no harm in asking boards to be more proactive in their learning and understanding. Well, I'll always have. If they ask for guidance, I'm always happy to help writing things. That's fine. But I think the place where it gets done is the senior leadership team. And that's where, that's where decisions are made. It's where the budget's set. That's where positions are put in place. They're doing the org chart. They're the ones setting the priorities. They're the ones making a 3-year plan, deciding whether I fund this or that. It's not the audit committee. It's the CFO, and it's the CTO and the CEO. So, of course, if people say, hey, board should be more engaged, you and I would always say, of course, that's what we do. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to say no to that. But I think the real responsibility is with the leadership team. They're the ones that need the help. That's where the resources should go. That's where more time and attention should go. So, for example, I think CEOs should have a risk executive reporting to them. It may not have to be a CISO, because the risk could be financial, geopolitical, it could be climate, it could be pandemic. There's a million risks. Cyber is a big part of it, obviously. You and I would say probably the biggest one of all. But you can make the argument that in some industries, AI could be a gigantic risk, artificial intelligence. So I feel like a more, like for me, the most urgent thing that could happen would be CEOs need to be getting better advice on risk. And I don't think that they always do. In banking, we always had CROs, but the CRO is a finance position. The CRO was looking at investment, looking at the balance sheet, and a necessary function. But a bank CRO, if you and I were having a cup of coffee with a bank CRO and said, what do you think about AI, for cyber defense? They wouldn't know what to say. But that's what for me, I think if our government wants to make some difference, I think that they should be encouraging leadership teams to have better representation than say boards. Because again, I was the head turning person. Cyber thing comes up, everybody's head turns to me. Ed, what do you think? And Alberto, I don't think that's the way a board's supposed to work, where you just have this one person who says, yeah, that sounds reasonable, or that's not. That's not how every other issues work. So that would be my thought. If you're going to make a difference, you make the difference with that senior most management team. They drive a company. That's where you show me that group, and I'll tell you whether the company's going to be successful. You show me the board, and I might be able to tell you something about the CEO, but I probably can't say much about the prospects for the company.
Correct. It makes total sense.
You know,
It also provides a roadmap for CISOs if they really want to get into the business and become more business risk executives.
yes,
and they're probably
risk
the best
executive.
prepared, right? They're the best prepared.
That like when people go, should the CISO report to the CEO? I always say sort of, meaning I like the idea, but I think it's a broader. I think it's a broader role than just cyber. I think it should be a chief risk executive, and that provides some growth. That would demand that someone expand their skill set to learn a little bit about finance, a little bit about, we mentioned AI. I think that that's a pretty big topic and some pretty, maybe even existential risks for some businesses, right? I mean, I'm not going to name names or anything, but you and I could come up with 5 or 6 companies where we'd go, I hope they're looking at AI. I hope, I hope they have a plan. And so having good guidance at that level, having a direct report who's obsessing on that, knows the business, peer to the other executives, working plans, working out the ecosystem, talking to people like you, getting a sense of what's going on in the innovation community. Man, that to me is, I think that, I don't know how you require that. Like, I'm not a big fan of the government. Like when people at SEC say you have to do something, yeah, whatever. But I think businesses should want to do these things, because I try to force a pill down anybody's throat. This is supposed to be good, right? It's supposed to help you, not the reverse. So that senior leadership team, man, that's where it happens. That's where a business, the cockpit, that's it. And you get that right, you're going to be in good shape. If you get it wrong, then God help you.
I like the analogy of the cockpit. Yeah. You have a lot of responsibility behind you.
That's it. Yeah, you have people there. All of us, our whole careers, hoping the CEO gets it right. And it's not the board. We don't sit in the person sitting in the cubicle is not sitting, gee, I hope the board makes a good decision. No, they say, I hope the CEO knows what we're doing, where we're going, and where we're marching, because the CEO is the most important position in any company.
Yeah. And as you talk about AI, instead of asking the generic questions, what do you think about it? So where are you focusing on your AI advisory in that you're launching? Because I'll be interested to learn more about it. And you're constantly evolving and adding topics that are of relevance. So tell us a little bit about what you're trying to accomplish. And it's amazing that you've been able to attract top talent from places.
Oh yeah. Well, I get them retired. When they retire, I grab them.
So I know we're too cold now.
That's right. But our joint friend Stu McClure came to see me in 2012, and he showed me Cylance. We were sitting in New York. I'm in New York today. We're sitting in New York, and he shows me what he wanted to do, AI for cyber defense. And I thought it was great. And I bought it immediately. I became a pilot customer and thing. One of my partners, one guys I work with in our team, Dave Newman, was at Rackspace at the time, bought the thing lock, stock, and barrel. We all loved it. I think since then, my observation is that because we didn't have great computing, like we didn't have GPUs then, we didn't have good big data analytics, there was weak algorithms. We've seen them better now. Jeffrey Hinton and others, these beautiful algorithms driven by the way the human brain works. Like a neural network fires in much the same way as neurons in the brain, plus the ability to make money. Now it's become so exciting. What I focus my time on now is on bigger issues, because I think cybersecurity plus AI could be really good. Like, it could be the great leveler. Here's what I mean. I think cyber defenses against AI, like offensive AI, have to be AI defenses. Right? You have to go like automation against automation. So it's possible, if companies can get this right, if a community you and I are part of, if we can create amazing defenses using AI, it'll be sort of like, here's an analogy. Let's say you worked at Goldman Sachs and you have access to Microsoft 365, Word, PowerPoint, Excel. You go, oh my God, the great tools that I have access to. Well, you could quit Goldman Sachs, become a 2-person company. You have access to the same Microsoft tools, Word, PowerPoint, Excel. There's no advantage to being in a big company. Oh my gosh, I have PowerPoint. Well, you have it yourself too. I think cybersecurity can be that too. Like, it could be that a big company is using the same really smart automation to stop attacks, and a little SMB could be using the same thing. And I think that's something you and I have never seen. We've never seen the big guys and little guys have access to the same thing. They just don't. They don't have the budget. They don't have the people. They don't have the wherewithal. That's why the SMB market, which I know you serve, is hard. It's a way harder market. They say, I don't have the budget and the money. But if they have the equivalent of, say, M365 for cybersecurity, think about how awesome that is. That starts to protect children's hospitals the same as a big investment bank. And that's why we do what we do. So that's why I've gotten so interested in AI. I think maybe this is the key. Maybe this, excuse the pun, maybe this is the key to really go into the next level, where we're not getting hacked every 2 minutes. And it would be good. It'd be good for the startup community, because we still have to provide the tech, but it would be good for everybody, because then all the mid-level and down companies, they're the ones the most exposed. You know that, I know that. And they would have access to something. So I would say I spend about a third of my day now on really talking to companies doing AI, trying to understand the analytics, trying to apply it to cyber, trying to advise government, particularly DHS, on strategies for building defense. And we've been squawking a lot about, maybe this is because Oppenheimer's in the movie theaters these days. I took my wife and I loved it. It was great. If you haven't seen it, it's a great movie. But I think we need like a Manhattan Project to protect our country using artificial intelligence, where we need to be training on common data sets, coordinating on how we build protocols where different AIs are sharing insight, and then protecting critical infrastructure using the best available, most intelligent infrastructure. And then you'll be up against offensive AI, but if you don't do the defensive AI, you're sunk, because people can't, just like you and I can't beat a computer at chess, you're not going to beat a computer, a smart piece of AI at cyber. So this is a time to be not walking, not running, but sprinting toward the most automated, most continuous, most intelligent solutions for cyber. That is number one issue. Because if we don't do that, then we might be seeing some pretty scary offenses we can't deal with. So I feel like I'm busier now than ever, because I'm consumed with that idea that the companies you fund and the companies that we all buy from and coach and so on might be a little bit behind on that. I think they're a little behind. You listen to a zillion proposals. The degree to which artificial intelligence is being used properly in cybersecurity is still a 3 out of 10, I would say. That's where I would put it.
Yeah,
Maybe,
properly is the right word.
yeah, properly, right. Everybody using it. But I mean, really having it to where any human decision making is either complemented by or gulp, gulp, gulp replaced by a piece of AI. But again, if AI is finding your weaknesses and going after you, then you have to do two things. One is you need to use AI to find them before they do. And two, you need to have artificial intelligence to react quickly with the best possible solution where there might be a trillion possibilities, but the AI picks the one that's best. You know, when you're driving to visit your cousin and then you go, hey, Google, what do I do? Like when I do this with my wife, I'll follow Google. She go, this is the dumbest thing. I say, no, Google's picking the best route. We're going to get there 3 minutes sooner. The AI has to do the same thing. It's going to have to pick the best defense, and we have to trust it. And the industry doesn't do that at all now. I don't know of anybody sort of working on that. And that should be the next few years, like as you guys are thinking about companies, the ones that sort of get that, I think that's where your next CrowdStrike is going to come from. It's not going to come from people doing the same thing better. That's incremental improvement, and that's always welcome. But where we get stepwise, the kind of really big change that you look for all the time, that's going to come. That's going to have artificial intelligence going to be in the middle of that for sure. That will be the power. That'll be the fuel behind the next big, massive growth of high real accelerated growth companies. That's my view. And I know that's not controversial. Most people in our orbit would agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you said we should be sprinting towards those solutions rather than saying, hey, put all the objections, because the world has changed and the infrastructure is ready because we're able to consume massive amounts of data, use predictive analytics. We have GPUs. We can do it now. It's not like before even if we said, hey, let's do that 3 years ago, and the bad guys are already using it. That's the other part, right? And we were kind of sitting in,
I think that's right. I don't think we've seen the full fury of what we could see. So I think that now I'm just speculating, but what the heck? That's why we get on these calls. We can speculate all we want.
Yeah.
But I'm speculating that the bad guys aren't using, but are testing. The verb I would use would be testing it. So if you get that moment where you think, wow, my adversary's testing this scary thing, if that prompts you to action, then you're thinking about it properly. You're supposed to prompt to action. So entrepreneurs doing cyber, what a great time. I mean, again, you don't want to be driven by fear. That's not reasonable. But the adrenaline of we need to do this to protect, that's what should be driving an entrepreneur. The job for you, job for me is to be funding, advising, supporting, helping them. But it's the job of the innovator, the developers, the people who are creating these companies to recognize where the problems are and frankly, where the problems aren't. You know, there's some things that we've solved in our industry. You know, we probably don't need another MFA solution. You know, I think we're good there.
Exactly.
Two other things, you've got that all covered, but the AI is the next thing.
We can continue for the rest of the day and just call it quits. And this has been an amazing ride, and I'm sure we can talk about a lot of things. But, you know, trying to bring it to an end, what advice do you have for people early in their careers? Because I get that question all the time, but I want to get Ed's perspective. What should you focus on? And it doesn't have to be just cyber. Let me just open it up and say, you know, what advice will you give him, especially if they're inclined to the science and this whole transformation of business and everything else? And they're more digital natives than we ever been.
I think that when I coach, particularly graduate students, because usually they're just starting out, I always talk about purpose, and I bet you do too. Like it's way more important to work for purpose and work for something you believe in than anything else in the world. Like if you get up every day and you feel like what you're doing is, if your thing is making the world better, I hope your purpose isn't making the world worse for all you evil, horrible people listening to us, don't listen to my advice. So you go do whatever. But the nice people, working for purpose is awesome because your career goes by quickly. You and I both know that. It goes fast. Before you know it, you look up and your kids are grown and you got grandchildren and you look back on your career. And here's the thing, a little exercise I would recommend you leave with everybody listening. Take a moment and think about your best day at work ever. What was it? What was the best day you ever had at work? And usually that causes someone to stop dead in their tracks because it's amazing how many people can't think of one. And that's tragedy. You say, what was the best day of work ever? You've been working for 30 years. What was the best day? And they go, didn't have one. I don't know. And you think, wow, that's not good. You know, I could give you a bunch of them for me. And it was always some achievement, something we thought couldn't get done and we got it done. And then we looked at it and you want to burst into tears that you made it work. And you go with a team, you worked real hard and you say, oh my God, we got that. That's working for purpose. That's not working for money. That's not working for promotion. So if you go through 30 years and you can't think of your best day at work, there wasn't one, then at the beginning of your career, ponder that for a moment and make sure you have all kinds of great days. And it's better if you're doing something nice for somebody than for yourself or accomplishing. As engineers, it's always, a good engineer will always say, oh, they'll list 5. And it's always this thing they did, this accomplishment, this hard thing as a group you worked on and you made something useful. Oh my gosh, died, went to heaven when you're in. That's why we do engineering. So that would be my advice. Purpose, and also make sure you don't go through a career without really having those moments of service where you've achieved something that's meaningful to you.
Ed, this is always an honor to speak with you and work with you. And I see the higher purpose and mission that you are into, which is very complementary to what we do. So I hope we can have you back in the podcast, in the Forgecast. And thank you for sharing all your experiences and learnings and your insights, because we're living in an industry that the only constant is change. And hopefully we'll have a little bit more to contribute in our careers and as a complementary efforts that we're trying to foster innovation.
That's wonderful. And a shout out to Tanya and Tyler and your whole team. They're always so helpful preparing for these sessions. And I really appreciate it. You run a first-class shop.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Subscribe to the Forgecast, which is brought to you by Forgepoint Capital. We're a leading cybersecurity and digital infrastructure venture capital firm that invests in exceptional teams protecting the digital future. To learn more about Forgepoint, visit forgepointcap.com or find us on LinkedIn and Twitter.